first thing on our agenda. So if Judy, you want to call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Forrester? Here. Ms. Kavanagh?
Here.
Mr. Jurdy?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Crummer will be absent today. Mr. Shoemaker?
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
And Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Oh,
Thank you.
since we're down to elected members, that would allow Trustee Anderson to vote today, even though the retiring representative is present. I just wanted to mention that in case he was not aware, but you can be a voting member today, Jim.
I hope you studied all your materials.
Yeah, welcome to the crowd.
So Pledge of Allegiance. Jared, you want to lead us to?
Again.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So our first item of business is there any public comment on items that are not on the agenda?
Well, we do not have any public in attendance at this time.
Thank you. So we have a consent agenda that has several things on it, and a couple of them may look new to you. We have the resolution for teleconference meetings that is on the consent agenda for the first time. We also have item D, which is an education report from our director. And because of the resolution, we will need to do a roll call vote. So first order of business, is there anything that anyone would like to take off of the consent agenda?
Chair,
Yes.
I simply have a question about the consent calendar. We normally on the consent calendar have what's called the month previous retirement report, and I just didn't see it on the consent calendar or somewhere else in the agenda.
Yes, the report has been delayed due to a little technical glitch, but next month we'll provide you with both the March retirement report and the April retirement report. My apologies, but we were waiting with some data from the county regarding an omitted pay code.
Okay, thanks.
Good catch. Thank you.
I had a question about item 1A.
Okay, do you want to take it off or just ask? I don't know. What is your question? It's a technical.
Well, we maybe take it off for discussion. I'm just wondering why we're still, if the public health officer opened up public meetings, why we still have this item on this agenda and aren't meeting together. So I guess that's my question about that item.
Should we take that off the consent agenda, Jeff? To discuss that?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, let's move forward with the consent agenda without item 1A on there. So we are, we still need to vote on it. Is that correct, Jeff, even though we take the resolution off?
Yeah, technically, because of AB 361, which was just kind of pulled off the agenda. I mean, we should have been doing roll call votes even on the consent items. So we should do that.
Okay, so we will do a roll call vote for the consent agenda items B, C, D, and E.
Move approval, Madam.
Okay.
Move approval of the consent calendar.
How about second it? Somebody already moved it. You want to second it?
Second.
Okay.
Okay, roll call.
The camera will rotate to you when you speak.
Okay.
And it's very hard to see, but you'll be in part of the box with the rest of us for the association.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, I'll take a roll call vote now. Ms. Forrester?
Yes.
Ms. Kavanagh?
Yes.
Mr. Jurdy?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Thank you.
So we will now turn to item 1A, and trustee Forrester had a question regarding why we are still using this resolution. So I'm going to turn it over to Director.
On the county's website, as far as I saw, the most recent health order was from March 9th. Was there a new one?
I guess I thought I saw something out over the last weekend that was published on the county page. I don't know, maybe Supervisor or Trustee Journey can give us an update. I know the Board of Supervisors met yesterday in person and they've opened up the building. I don't think there's a recommendation or requirement anyway by the public health officer to hold.
Well, the March 9th order was a recommendation to hold public meetings online. With the suggestion that social distancing and masking be applied to public meetings for people who attend in person. Now, I understand that there was a lifting of the recommendation for masking, but I don't think he had lifted it for his recommendation for public meetings, but that is a recommendation. And as long as the health officer is recommending online public meetings, we would have the capacity to continue. And the state law also is still in effect that would permit telemeetings due to the pandemic. Jeff, did you want to add something?
So the only thing I'd like to add, I believe all that's correct. If AB 361 wasn't there or the health officer's order changed, what this allows the trustees to do, and we have several of them who are appearing remote today, it relaxes what would otherwise be required, which is that we'd have to post the address of where they're at, and they would have to allow the public to attend where they're physically located. But my understanding is consistent with Doris, is that the health officer's recommendation enables us to continue to have these kind of hybrid meetings in this fashion.
Trustee Shoemaker.
Yeah, thank you. Jeff, if we don't have this resolution, will that go back into effect that all locations have to be noticed?
Yes. I mean, I think there are bills being proposed right now to modify the Brown Act. As long as you have a majority in the chambers or wherever you meet, then you may be able to, in the future, for example, if you wanted to be remote, you wouldn't have to post your address and allow the public into your home. But those are still just bills right now. But AB 361 allows us to proceed the way we are right now.
So on that topic, I don't know if this is going to hit legislative action by SACers, but I believe that this would be good to have permanentized for all meetings so the public and trustees can participate from other locations. And I'd urge this board to take this up as a support item, any bill that does this. And I want to add one technical issue here. Through these meetings, I don't know if everybody knows, if you're muted and you want to talk, you can simply hold down your space bar while you're talking and your mute goes off. So you don't always have to search around to hit the mute button. Thank you.
That is good piece of information I did not know. Thank you very much. And I've lost my internet connection, but I will work on that. So
I'm currently looking at the most recent health order that was posted on the county site, and it is dated March 9th.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
And that's the one that he says he's recommending.
Strongly
Online.
recommends online public meetings to the extent possible.
Okay, thank you. I thought I had heard something last weekend that order had changed, and given that the county building had opened up and the Board of Supervisors opened up. I mean, I'm an advocate for sure for hybrid meetings for our participants in the public, but I would like to see the return of the board to these chambers. And so I hope we can move that way and still have that as well as a hybrid for our public. Agreed.
okay, so we need a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll move to approve.
Resolution
Second.
2022. Who said that?
I move to approve.
Okay, and the second, okay. Richard second. We'll need a roll call.
Okay. And Ms. Forrester?
No.
Ms. Cavness?
Yes.
Mr. Jurdy?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Shoemaker?
Aye.
Okay. Ms. Harris?
Aye.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So we will be going into closed session, so we'll let Judy do what she needs to do. Are there any public out there that has public comment? Judy, do you see anything?
We do have members of the public present. Do not see any public comment at this time.
Okay. Our closed session will cover a conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation. And we have 2 disability applications, one for William Peterson and one for Jeffrey Andrade. So we will be discussing those in closed session, and we will come back to report out at the end of closed session.
And we'll need just a couple of minutes to get that set up.
Which gives me a couple of minutes to try to figure out why. And we'll ask Jeff Burke to report out on that.
So there were three matters that the board heard in closed session. 3A, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. The board gave direction to staff and counsel. On 3B, the board voted unanimously to grant William Peterson a service-connected disability retirement. And on item 3C, the board voted to grant Jeffrey Andrade a service-connected disability retirement, and trustees Harris and Jurdy voted no.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, we will move on then to agenda item number 4, discussion regarding the historical benefit review project status report and project updates. And I would ask first if there are any public comments on this agenda item. And if not, then I would ask Director Rencheck.
There is no public comment at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Smith, members of the board. The historical benefit correction project status report is provided in your packets. It gives monthly and project totals for the corrections that have occurred. I would like to point out that because of Katie's retirement and the time necessary to recruit and hire for the 2 positions and now training of those, you will notice that there is actually no reported action that occurred in March or April. We do hope to get back into addressing some of the corrections with the coming months. I'm happy to answer any of the questions if there are any.
Mine is not necessarily a question, but the various highlighted pensions that are in there is.
What do you mean?
Well, it's in all the really large ones.
Every other row has shading on it just to make it easier to read, so you stay on the same line.
Well, this isn't shaded.
Yeah, that's gray shading. Every other row is gray shaded to make it easier to stay looking at it across the page.
Yeah, no, that was my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there some other highlighting I didn't see?
Yeah.
Looking for.
Those are bold for the month. So
Month.
those are totals for the month. So after the individual counts, there's a summation for the entire month. She was asking about large totals. Those were monthly totals for action.
I was wondering who was getting.
That's typically a
862,000.
sum of the
Yeah.
benefits, the new benefit, the old benefit, the change in benefits, or amounts in the liability. Okay?
Thank you. That's good. Yeah. Okay, if there are no further questions or comments regarding the report on the historical benefit review project, we will move on to agenda item number 5, discussion and possible action regarding investment matters. And are there any public comments on this?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Is this a trustee?
I will turn this over to Robert.
Robert, okay.
Trustees, you have the monthly investment report before you. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I guess the one thing I would point out is that we sent a fair amount of funding to our real estate managers this quarter. So you'll see that reflected in the next month's quarterly report. Yeah, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
It says possible action. Do we have to formally accept this report?
I think it's a receive and file, really, so it doesn't take any actual action upon the board unless there's something came up that required action, but I don't believe there was anything. It obviously gives our performance for the month compared to February.
Right. Okay, any comments or questions? Thank you, Robert. We will move on then to agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action regarding resolution 2022-07, defining compensation earnable pursuant to government code section 31461 for members who are not subject to government code section 7522.34.
And that is
Non-PEPRA
a
members.
mouthful.
Yes, it is.
This new pay code is a retroactive correction pay code that payroll needed to use to retroactively correct someone's paid leave use from like sick leave or vacation time to the California supplemental paid COVID sick leave paid. And this is non-pensionable because it is a retroactive. Pensions were paid when the original leave time was used. So this is the only change to both the PEPRA and the non-PEPRA. So this summary covers the next resolution also. Just adding this new pay code as non-pensionable for our non-PEPRA members. The next resolution will add it as non-pensionable for PEPRA members.
Yes.
I move we adopt resolution, read this,
2207
as presented.
Can we adopt 2207 and 2208 at the same
I
time?
will absolutely make.
Can we do that,
motion.
Jeff?
Yeah, you should check and see if there's any public comment, but yes.
Okay. So we do have a motion to approve 2022-07 and 2022-08. I did ask for public comment on 07. Is there any public comment on resolution 08?
There's no public comment.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
So there's a second to approve both 2022-07 and 2022-08. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? So we need a roll call vote on this.
Yes, Ms. Forrester,
Yes.
Ms. Cavanis,
Yes,
thank
sorry.
you. Mr. Drury,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Shoemaker,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
and Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you. Both resolutions passed.
Thank you. So on the next agenda items, I want to put agenda item 9 before agenda item 8. So agenda item 9 is discussion regarding the draft strategic plan. And I would ask if there's any public comments on agenda item 9.
There is no public comment at this time.
So I will turn it over to Director Lynch.
Thank you, Chair Smith, members of the board. At last month's meeting, you received the draft strategic plan, and it is going to come back for a second read and adoption. I asked that that be delayed so I could request a few changes to some of the objectives listed in the proposed strategic plan. And I outlined those major changes in the accompanying memo. First of all, the draft strategic plan included an objective of considering developing a position on ESG investments. This is something that we have provided, I believe, 3 educational sessions on ESG in the past 18 months. And the direction previously from the board had been to bring this back at the offsite where we did provide another educational session and discussion on it. So I thought that that would essentially be the end of this unless there was more direction to look into forming a position statement, and there wasn't any at that February meeting. But since this came in on the draft plan, I wanted to know whether the board wanted to maintain it as part of the draft or the adopted strategic plan, or if you wanted to go ahead and remove it. If we leave it in the strategic plan, we will just incorporate this into the next time we do the investment policy statement and investment belief statement, which is going to come up in, I think, April of 23. But it didn't seem like there was a lot of interest from the board after Jeff's presentation and Robert's presentations in actually creating a position statement. And I just wanted to find out if the board had a desire to create a position statement on ESG.
Any comments from trustees? Yes, trustee Jordan.
Well, I think we should, and I think there's maybe new opportunities for the ESG strategies and investments that might not even exist today. I mean, that could be emerging. We know that some larger investors are using their clout as as shareholders in companies to have a proxy vote and change the character and nature of the companies, change the direction of the companies. Other strategies could be to, potentially not invest in certain companies. So I think there's a role for ESG strategies with MSERA, but I don't know that we have the perfect language today to characterize what that would be for MSERA, but I think it should be part of our overall strategy.
I agree. I also think that the sustainability factor is something to consider, that, it's going to be around for a while.
Thank you. Unless there's any other direction from the board, we can keep that in the strategic plan. And even, it can certainly come back for additional board review, or every time the investment policy is up for renewal, we can certainly look at our investment beliefs and determine if there's anything we wish to add or change. So it's not a static one and done, but I'll go ahead and leave that in the plan.
Do you want to change the wording at all as to continue to investigate or?
No, I'm just going to leave it the way it is.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Trustee Shoemaker?
Sure. I think Dan raises a very interesting point that ESG is not just about picking particular stocks that you think are doing the right thing, but it's also creating a strategy as a investor to either participate or not participate in stocks that you already have in regard to policy decisions. I think it's, if you've followed anything about, I can't remember which oil company it is, Dan, I'm sure can tell us, that there was a move afoot there to change the character of the board. And I don't know how the outcome of that is, but that is a little deeper than just buying or selling ESGs. So I think if we look at it as an expanded concept, and it does come back for a discussion in regard to what might be acceptable strategies within owning ESGs or non-ESG stocks, I think it's a reasonable thing to put in under this item.
Okay, we will incorporate that with the investment policy and the belief statement that we'll be bringing back in 23.
Thank you.
Yes.
Secondly, the draft plan included under goal 2 as objective B, undertake a rebranding exercise. And I wanted to feel out the board's position on that. Initially, although you didn't necessarily get into the details, the consultant provided some sample actions that would be associated with different objectives. And she mentioned, refreshing our brand and making sure that, we update our logo and our website, and all of our forms are consistent, and all those things are all nice. And Sarah basically did that in 2017. And while rebranding is certainly much more than just, your logo and your forms, we currently rely on the county for our website, and we don't have the control to change, a lot of structural items there. It's going to fall into the county's template and color scheme and, all of those things. Rebranding can be very expensive. And one thing that showed from the small survey that was done as part of the strategic plan is that people really, for the most part, had a positive impression of MSERA and thought that our staff was extremely knowledgeable and gave them good information. I'm just not sure I saw the benefit to trying to do a full rebrand based on what I looked up as far as the cost. A simple refreshing of logos started around $30,000. And if you go to a full rebranding, it was easily over $100,000 to $250,000. And part of the strategic plan is your board's direction on whether or not this is important and where you want to spend your resources. So I wanted to touch base on this one, because if we include it in the strategic plan as a goal, it is something that's really going to require some additional resources. Because I can tell you right now, I am not a branding expert, and you do not want me to lead your rebranding exercise. So the board would have to be willing, of course, to dedicate resources to that type of objective if it's important to you.
Yes, trustee Harris.
Not now.
Not now. Trustee Shoemaker.
You're muted still.
I agree with Trustee Harris's statement. And I do believe this measure that's being knocked out because it's under objective B is certainly a worthy measure. So if we could reincorporate that in another spot, that would be great.
And we certainly have in goal 2 a lot of survey of what our membership wants as far as communication and services and et cetera from us. So we will have a basis for enhancing our relationship with our different stakeholder groups. I'm just not sure that rebranding was necessary at this point for this plan because of where we are. We do have a lot of work to do to maybe even get to the point where we could look at whether or not rebranding made sense.
So the resolution of the items in the historical benefit project and the increased and better communication will solve that issue. I don't think we need a new logo and all of that. So maybe it was just not worded correctly.
Yeah. Well, certainly rebranding is more than just logos and forms. And it's not necessarily that you have to have a bad public perception to undergo rebranding. You can kind of proactively work on your branding with your stakeholder groups. But again, we do have a lot on our plate, and this would take probably some significant resources here within the next 3 to 5 years. And is that where you want to be dedicating the time right now in the strategic plan?
Well, unless I hear otherwise, we're going to ask that that be taken out. Okay? All right. We'll go on to number 3 when you're ready.
Number 3 was an objective that was grow strategic stakeholder relationships. I just thought that this could be easily incorporated into the broadening of communication programs to grow strategic stakeholder relationships, because there did seem to be a lot of overlap in some of the actions that the sample action plan that the consultant provided overlapped a lot between those 2 goals. So I thought rather than keep them as 2 separate, it would be just easier for me to kind of combine them into one, but I certainly can leave those separate. It's at the board's preference.
I like that suggestion, Doris. Makes sense.
I think it's, more of a wordsmithing, simplified. Anybody opposed to Doris's suggestion? No. Okay. Number 4.
So this one is perhaps a little more detailed. There was an objective to develop and implement a process to evaluate sourcing decisions for MCERA's core business operations. That initially was written to mean our reliance on the county for IT infrastructure and services. And later on, there was also an item talking about developing a way to evaluate our consultants. So we're going to be doing an IT roadmap as part of the strategic plan. And that IT roadmap will actually look at what services we rely on the county and what alternatives we have as far as getting those services elsewhere and the cost effectiveness of it. So since that's going to be part of the IT roadmap, I didn't think this needed to be a separate own objective, but I wanted to maybe broaden the concept of our consultant evaluation and make it a process of evaluating our core service providers, whether they are our pension administration system, our other vendors, or our consultants. It's a broader scope, but we would define some criteria that would allow us to periodically evaluate not just our consultants, but really all of the different core service providers that MSARA relies on.
By broadening it, it's still specific enough to get action items.
Yes, and like I said, part of it will be covered under the IT roadmap, but then that's the initial evaluation of where we're reliant upon the county. And then the other objective becomes the development of a process to continually evaluate that on an ongoing basis. So the board is always in touch with all of our main core service providers, whether it's actuary or investment consultant or our custodial bank or our our pension administration system. So that's where I was sort of viewing this as going.
Okay, Trustee Shoemaker?
So part of the discussion at the session was specifically in regard to the county, and for this trustee, it also was an issue of further independence, and that part of this was analyzing if there was further work that needed to be done to be an independent organization from the county.
And I think a lot of that will come through as part of the IT roadmap, which is going to identify our technological needs moving forward in the next 3 to 5 years. And that includes a review of the county services and if we should source them elsewhere, which ties into, a more independent structure from the county. So I think we're going to get the information that you're looking for, Richard, as part of that IT roadmap that I have drafted an RFQ or RFP process to get some quotes on services. And of course, it's defined within the scope. I'm happy to bring that document if the board wants to review it, or if the board wants to set up an ad hoc committee to look at both the document before it's issued and responses to the request for quotes or proposals once we receive some.
So this is in response to one of the objectives on the strategic plan.
Yes.
So I guess my thing in this is where I come from on it has something to do with IT, but the IT roadmap will not address the issues that this board has faced in the past in regard to personnel designations, changing certain HR policies, and more of an independence from the county, not simply as a service provider, but as somebody who has a pretty serious impact on some parts of our operation.
But the draft strategic plan as it was written does not necessarily go down the path you're talking about, Richard. It has an item for succession planning, which deals some with staffing, and it talked about this reliance on the county infrastructure and looking at alternative sources under the IT issue. It does not have a separate item to specifically address the overarching impact of our interdependence upon the county. So that's not what you're specifically asking for included in the plan as it was presented last month.
I'm going to interject here. I see, Richard, the difference between the original objective C does say core business operations, whereas the proposed modified objective C says service providers, vendors, and consultants. I could see how core business operations might include HR and stuff.
That is a good point. And I was reviewing this in light of the proposed action plan that the consultant also provided that did not specifically call out actions to those other things.
Okay.
We have made some historical progress, of course, with the county as far as classification of our personnel and wages, but of course, we certainly are reliant on the county's structure for providing the salary range, et cetera, for those positions. Trying to go independent certainly would be very labor intensive and has some advantages and some disadvantages. If you want something specific on independence, then you might want to carve that out and make it its own objective that specifically states it very clearly what you want that objective to obtain or at least research, because everybody is bringing their own view to this document. We need to make sure that it's clear enough that I understand what you as the board want. Someone else may not have read that the way that you're pointing out or have the same interpretation of it. So it is very important to me that I get specific direction on what you expect these measurable outcomes to be in regard to objectives in the strategic plan. And she, of course, had provided some measurements in support of different objectives, and I'm looking for this objective. Was it goal 2, goal 3? It was in goal 3.
I'll put my hand down and see if there's any other comments by other board members.
I couldn't understand anything you said, Richard. I'm sorry.
Yes, I couldn't hear it either, Richard.
I will pull down my hand, and if there's any other comments to the topic of independence, we'll have it, and if not, we'll move on. Thank you.
I've got 2. Trustee Jurdy, I've got 3 now. Trustee Jurdy first.
So I think the subject of independence deserves a lot of discussion, and I don't know if we're really going to be able to do that today, but I just think we should think about all the potential ramifications of that. And for example, if we were to look at some of the largest pension funds in the nation, like CalPERS or maybe CalSTRS also, I believe the top executives there, for example, are paid more than the governor of the state of California, and maybe not just the top executive, but maybe a number of the employees there. So I'm just saying that, that discussion can go in all sorts of directions. And I think we ought to be prepared for the full everywhere it goes, because I do think that was, honestly, that was an issue with the previous CEO and Dr. Wilbanks, sort of ruffled feathers with the CEO with the idea that the administrator for the retirement system could possibly be paid as, nearly as much as the CEO. My feathers weren't ruffled in the whole discussion. I think people should be paid based on their value. But anyway, I'm just saying that I think there's a lot to this discussion.
Are you proposing perhaps that something else be added to the strategic plan regarding investigating independence?
No, I think we should investigate it. I'm just saying I think we should think about everywhere that discussion goes.
But if you think we should investigate it and our strategic plan lays out our work plan for the next 5 years, then I'm thinking that maybe it needs to be written in there somehow.
Okay. I think partly because independence can ruffle some feathers or create some conflict with your major plan sponsor, that she may have also been trying to phrase it without use of that word. But you have to understand, you're right, it is very involved, and there are a lot of costs associated with trying to go independent, whether it's providing our own human resources support and hiring people, our own payroll system, our own benefits for staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is a very, very big job in and of itself to separate.
So Trustee Forrester has some comments.
On the IT roadmap in this section, I know this is the strategic plan, but while we're on IT roadmap, it's sort of budget related. So I'm looking to Robert as well. I'm hoping to know, which I think is coming next month in the budget, what the enterprise costs are, which I think are passed on here to MSARA as well for IT. And some detail on that, because rather than just getting, oh, it's $30,000 in the budget from Sarah, where does that come from? I'd like to hear some more, if Robert can get that detail from the county, because that's part of what services they're providing to us that are supportive, and how is that calculated? And when we're discussing independence, I can see that being extremely costly, and that we might want to look at, you know, areas where we could benefit from the independence, and maybe that's IT. So we're more in control of that function, whereas we keep some other items still with the county. So I feel like it's a balance. But anyway, that's what I'm hoping for in the IT roadmap, if I can throw that in.
And Robert had already reached out.
Okay.
Every time the county provides us with new budget figures, asking how they came up with that cost for us. And we can certainly provide that as a comparison to what alternatives may cost for the board's consideration.
Trustee Cavness had a comment earlier.
Well, Dan pretty much said everything that I agree with him. What I was going to make some extra comments, which he covered. However, like with the technology aspect of the cost, our department too wanted to know, you know, how they come up with those figures, and we were told that it was a cost distributed throughout the county where it was $139 per employee, and so per month, I guess. And so we have grant supported programs as well, and this is like difficult as far as that goes, and I never got further clarification beyond that actual number, 139 per person, and I would like to know more about how that cost is being distributed.
Okay. Trustee Jordan?
Yeah, just on the topic of the IT, and this probably really could potentially be an ad hoc committee or something. But I mean, if we want to dive more into how the costs work for the IT department and opportunities to cut those costs, you know, I'd be happy to help set up a meeting with the IT department. You know, I think there are I think there's some suggestions that they might have that could help us cut their costs and therefore our costs.
Trustee Harris.
CalPERS, CalSTRS, where we went into difficulty was in what we paid our CEO. And when you think about the position that we have here, $700 million our CEO deals with, and even at CalPERS or CalSTRS, it was extremely limiting as far as who we could bring into positions like Chief Investment Officer. And state of California puts a real ceiling on whoever goes for those positions. And I think that's something we ought to look into, because, you know, we really need to compete statewide to bring in, and actually more than that. And to bring someone in, we want the very best, and we want the best investment as well. And that was where, you know, we started to pay bonuses so we could get our people up over $600,000 or $700,000 a year. Yeah.
Well, I have two comments. One is that I've heard the potential for ad hoc task forces or committees. My personal thought is that we wait until next month when the strategic plan, we hopefully will approve it in its final version, and then we can look at the action items there and form some ad hoc committees as needed as we move through our work plan. I don't see that one is necessarily necessary today. Are we okay with that? Yep. And then the second comment is just a personal comment because, and Jerry, you may remember this, we dealt with the Mendocino College Foundation at one time wanting to become an independent board, and lots of research and lots of work into that, and ultimately decided it was not going to be cost effective because of all the services that the college provided, such as personnel and everything. So I guess I'm not optimistic that that is something that we would end up pursuing here, but it's always worth a conversation.
So I can go back and give my comments to the consultant for inclusion and the draft that you'll get back for hopefully adoption at next month's meeting that will further delineate those two concepts as far as the reliance on IT infrastructure versus reliance on the county for other services in a broader regard, and go back closer to what she may have had there originally as far as business operations.
But don't use the word independent.
I will not use the word independent.
Yes. So you had one other item.
I just added a success measure under the goal 4 about strengthening risk oversight, which was to look into the feasibility of some cybersecurity audit or risk assessments. And I've actually already reached out to the county regarding this, but I just added that as a potential success measure, and I'll be bringing back more information as far as that as a risk measure. The only other things where I changed some of the timing from the initial draft as far as when items might be complete. Again, it seemed to shift several of the options up sooner, but I did that intentionally to leave more space in the later part of the plan, years 3, 4, and 5, for projects that may come out of the IT roadmap or some of the other work we're doing here. You know, we're going to look at surveying, finding out what our members' preferences and needs are, et cetera, and that will translate into the development of some of the educational programs, et cetera. So I was leaving a little more flexibility in the time to roll out programs associated or new actions that may be derived from some of the initial work at the beginning of the plan. So that was just my explanation as to why I shifted some of the timing around.
Okay. You're the one who knows best about what we can get done when.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had some.
The last item was that the strategic plan requires the creation of an annual board agenda calendar to aid the board in evaluating how they're spending its time fulfilling its obligations and responsibilities. I provided 3 different samples in this attached to this memo because I want to know what you as a board finds most beneficial as far as the information, how it's presented, and then I'll move forward with providing that. So there is a example. It starts on page 10 of 15 of that item in your board packet that shows the months with a verbal description of the different items, both routine and strategic, et cetera, that could be happening in that month. The following item was then a 2-page calendar. It's similar to the 1 page that was before it, but it breaks down the topics that the board may be talking about in a particular month into some 3 large categories, whether it's governance and oversight or finance and investments or operations. And I did that so you can see, oh, well, we have a lot of items regarding governance on this month, or this is important because we're getting, you know, investment education or something like that. So it just breaks it out a little bit differently. Whereas before, in the previous example, they're just line item listed. And I don't know which one the board might find most useful or easy to use. The last option laid it out as a calendar with just X's, but it doesn't provide necessarily the narrative And it doesn't give you an idea of how much is falling on one specific month. So, but it kind of gives you a snapshot, a picture that you're looking at that overview for a year at a time. The slight advantage to using the last format is that it can be a rolling calendar. So every month, when a month falls off, the next month can roll in. So you're always seeing that view of 12 months shot, a picture of what's upcoming on your agendas. I really like some sort of feedback on what type of information you're looking for out of your board, your annual board calendar, and some feedback on which of these versions you might prefer.
Trustee Anderson, I'll let you go first.
Thank you. And Doris, or Director Rensselaer, thank you for the work. For me personally, and I know different people have these types of things speak to them differently. I preferred the number 3 with the X's. And one of the things that I liked about it, we talked at the strategic planning retreat a lot about the board's bandwidth to handle different issues, and where this easily incorporates things such as actuarial reports, audits, budget, all of those different types of things that we do as trustees. It gives you an idea of where our calendar is getting crowded, and gives us an opportunity ahead of time to potentially move some of those X's around and discuss how we might better get our work done. So I just like option 3.
That's interesting to me, Jim, because I was gonna say, I like the first 2 and not option 3.
Yeah, I would use, yeah.
Okay, but I'm gonna have to narrow it down to 1.
Oh, no. Well, my thought was on option 1, that this is maybe not by year, but it is a general format for every year that shows us what month this is coming and what month this is coming. And so I wouldn't necessarily change it every year for like T. Rowe Price gave a presentation or things like that.
I understand what you're saying, and I do keep a different rolling calendar to make sure that things that come up periodically always get put back on the agenda, and also using past agendas is a great way of doing that. The consultant kind of indicated that they needed to incorporate also some of the strategic items in addition to the routine or operational, and it was supposed to be, I thought, more specific than just kind of a general framework of, but again, it's however you plan to use it and what's going to be most beneficial to you as a group. So I'll back off.
Well, I could see the number 1 format being just for the operational items, and you have that you use, and probably Judy has something too that you use to make sure you get the right thing in the right month. So I can see how that would be beneficial for the board to have that information. But I also, on number 2, like the way it was designated in columns about what we're spending our time on and what should we be spending our time on. Shoot, we spend a heck of a lot of time on operations, and that's not really the board's duty.
Well, when it says operations, that includes all the things like adoption of minutes and routine things on the agenda. It's not necessarily, operations of day-to-day operations of benefits or things of that. But yes, it does kind of break things out into different categories and defines on, of course, how you identify operations.
That's a good
but that's how I put things like routine operations was all of the reports that you get on the consent agenda. That was a lot of what goes in there.
But that's governance and oversight too. So yeah, okay. I see what you're saying.
But somebody else had their hand up and then they took it down. So,
Catherine.
I like number 2 the best because I think for me it gives me the most information, and I also like the categorizing between governance and oversight in finance and investments and operations. I would feel most comfortable with number 2.
And I can't necessarily, Jim, say why the X's didn't appeal to me. I do like the fact that it has more description of what we're doing down the left-hand column. I'm not sure what I didn't like about that, but I see the appeal. So trustee Shoemaker.
I'm going to chime in on number 2 as one that for me is the most easily deciphered and generally looking at it. Then I also look at it as something that if this were on our website, that our members could get a better sense. I think having some brief explanation is good. And, this may be a tough thing to add into it, but if there is a general season for like SACers, for a particular month, they always have a meeting, you could drop that in here. And for other other outside the board meeting things that might be important to the board members as, oh, shoot, that's coming up in December or whatever. I know we get those comments from staff, but having them on this might be one minor addition.
Okay, we do actually have a board meeting calendar on the website, which also lists all of the conference dates, like the SACers and the calipers type stuff, along with what date your meeting actually falls. But it doesn't have any descriptive narrative. It's just a calendar highlighting the dates that certain things occur. Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, this is going to be an alternative to.
Go ahead, Richard, sorry.
I was just saying, if this is what will come up as an alternative to that calendar, that melding them together is helpful.
Okay. If we get rid of the other calendar, he wants it on this calendar, is what I'm hearing. Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, and to the full board, I'm certainly not wedded to number 3. In looking at number 2, I think the whole idea was to make sure that we have board resource time for all of the areas. And at times it's pretty easy to really become like a finance and investment board, as opposed to paying attention to what is going on operationally, government and oversight and so forth. And the whole idea was to make sure that we had that we covered all of our bases, as opposed to just being an investment board. So number 2 works well from that standpoint. We all just read things differently. And like I said, 3 was easy to read for me, but I can see 2 kind of fulfilling the intent that was expressed at our offsite perhaps a little better.
Other comments?
I like number 2. I just think it's easier to read. And echo their comments with, I like the separate sections of governance oversight. It shows the areas we're working on. You can quickly at a glance see what we're dealing with in that month, what areas we're covering. I feel like it's the easiest to read. And my second would be number 1.
I would, at a glance, looking at number 2, and you look at the blanks on finance and investments, I would at least switch one of the routine operational items over there, because we look at finance every single month.
Yes.
So I want people to see that we're looking at it every month.
Right, but I put it as routine because they were not action items. But the quarterly was more of an in-depth review and potentially an action item, where just the monthly report, whether it's the financial report or the investment report, you're getting it monthly, but I treated that as operational here. But I could certainly put that in the finance and investment column, because you do receive it every month. I know it looks like there's some big gaps there where you're not looking at investment items, and I know that's not the case. This was sort of a first draft, and certainly I can incorporate that feedback and give you that added detail.
Well, I think specifically for finance, that would be important, because members are trusting us as a board to be watching our finances every month. So I at least think that one item should be moved over. I don't know if anybody would argue against that. So it sounds like we're going for number 2 as a consensus with, apologies to Jim, but because he
And
started.
Catherine Kapnis, who liked number 1.
Oh, Catherine liked 1, okay.
Oh, I thought she liked 2. Yeah, she
Two.
liked.
Oh,
she
all
liked
right,
2.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know who I wrote down. I had
Yeah.
somebody on my count as number 1, but great. I'll make some tweaks, but you'll be seeing, probably mostly a version of calendar number 2 come back.
Any other comments on, thank you, Richard, for the thumbs up. Any other comments on agenda item 9? We've given direction to Doris and we'll move forward. Okay then.
Thank you, I truly appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. So I did ask Doris if we could switch 8 and 9 because I saw in item 8, and it's just a draft, but I saw that she had used some of the new wording that she was proposing for the draft strategic plan in item 8. So I wanted her to go over the changes in item 9 before we did item 8. So let's go backwards. And we do need to look at the board work plan, and I will ask first if there's any public comments on agenda item 8.
There does not appear to be public comment.
Thank you. So Director Rentschler.
Thank you, Chair Smith, members of the board. On the work plan item, there are 2 work plans. One is the final work plan for the old version that was operated under the last strategic plan. I highlighted certain topics on this plan to show how they relate then to some of the objectives of the incoming plan. And that's why things have been highlighted where they were never highlighted in the past. So this shows essentially our progress on some items. Check marks were completed. There have been a change with our newsletter. We have, as of the April newsletter, resumed producing that monthly. So we'll issue again in May. If you have any questions on the last work plan under the old format, please let me know. And then starting on probably about page 5 of the board work plan is a sample of what might be seen under the new work plan. And it ties to the goal and the specific objectives and different than actions that might be taken in support of each objective, and would give you a little status on the expected completion date and whether or not work on that is on track or to be started, etc. So you can see, again, there are several highlighted areas. Those items in yellow highlight correspond to really actions and items that were included on our existing board work plan that are incorporated into the new strategic plan.
My only comment, I like the new one a lot better, actually.
Oh, thanks.
My only comment or question is the progress, the status. I see the check marks and the exclamation points. This is so minor. I'm really sorry to even bring this up.
I can put any kind of marker you want there, or no marker at all.
And it seems so.
I don't want a happy face.
Right, no happy face. The one, like the new being an exclamation mark. I guess there's no differentiation between a check and exclamation mark. So an in progress to me doesn't, an exclamation mark's like, something's delayed here. So if it's in progress, maybe we could come, again, seems minor, but.
Those were pre-designated icons available in Excel. They come with or without like check mark and explanation. You can certainly use just green, yellow, and red dots. The red would have a big X. The yellow has the exclamation point, and the green has a check mark. But I can certainly look at alternatives. I will skip the smiley faces this time. That was a holder from the prior,
Yes.
But certainly I'm open to any suggestions there. I'm looking hopefully to give you a work plan that aligns with your strategic plan. And this was laid out following the same format as your goals and objectives that are in your strategic plan. And then underneath those are specific action items that we will be undertaking.
Well, the differentiation in our old work plan between the green smiley face and the check mark, there is a distinction there, because the check mark meant it's done.
Right, and then it would fall off the plan. And that's true. Now, I could go to just green, yellow, red dots and use the check mark separately to indicate that it was completed and done,
Yeah.
if that would make more sense. Because that does sort of align more with how it was in your last plan.
I think keeping the completed items on the work plan is good, because it helps remind us what has been completed. So I like what you just said, using some sort of designation for complete and another one for it's ongoing, it's working well, etc.
Okay, I'll incorporate those.
Any other comments on that? I see on the new proposal that there are some that say to be determined and all of that, so.
Right, there's at least one objective that hasn't really been fleshed out with action steps yet. That would sort of support the benefit correction project. And part of that is really just going to be dependent on the future course based on our closed session discussion. So I don't have anything built out there yet. And this will be a document that is constantly modified, as certain things are completed. As you said, you might like to leave them there so you can see that it was completed. We'll add other new actions that have been established in support of certain goals. And so this report will change over time, and to incorporate new actions as we decide that that's a course of action that we're going to take.
Are we looking at a monthly report or a quarterly report?
This would be a version of the quarterly. I can provide it monthly if you want, but currently you're getting your board report quarterly, and I thought that the administrative report, I could take the opportunity in that report to give an update if there was something that should be mentioned prior to a quarterly update, but I'm certainly open to board preference on that.
This is not unique to Sarah. I've seen it many times, but it always gets me when I see something like this, it says board work plan, and then I just read all the things that you guys are doing.
Well, again, this does in part overlap with staff work plan, although the staff work plan has some other action items on it. This really the board's
Oversight of the work.
are the objectives, and then of course your measurement of success in meeting those objectives. But I wanted to make sure the board was informed of what actions were being taken in support of those objectives. But I don't know, I didn't have another template or anything to work from except our past board plan, and finding a board calendar was, how to develop a board calendar was a challenge for me. And so was in figuring out what should or shouldn't go in a board work plan. I'm happy to make any modifications the board would like to see.
I think it looks good. Yes. Trustee Shoemaker.
I think if you just call it the Sarah work plan, you might solve that issue.
All right, I can certainly strike the word board.
Because the board doesn't do any work anyway, right?
Oh, there will be. I've got a whole list of some stuff that you guys are going to be working on.
Okay. Any other comments? So we're moving forward and people like the format, so thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So we will move forward to item 10, discussion of possible action regarding executive director charter. And I will say the intro comments will also cover agenda item 11, discussion of possible action regarding executive director performance evaluation policy and evaluation form. And are there any public comments on these items?
There's not public comment at this time.
Okay. So I'm gonna take this one on. Yes. First of all, we had an ad hoc committee that was made up of trustee Shoemaker, trustee Anderson, and myself that got together to look at the evaluation process and forms for our executive director. The intent eventually is to align it with a strategic plan, and it hasn't been accomplished that way in the past, but we do want to be able to evaluate our executive director on the items that we tell her we want her to complete. So we haven't been able to do that yet until we adopt a strategic plan, and because of the timing of the evaluation deadline and the end of the year, we're going to continue using the format or the policy that we have used in previous years, but our ad hoc committee, and I will welcome Richard and Jim to input anything they need to say. Our ad hoc committee had some simple ways we thought that would improve the current process, even though we may not use this in future years, but we really thought that there was a need to improve what we did last year. So let me just point out the changes that we are proposing. So the first document is the executive director charter that is in your packet. And on the executive director charter, in the introduction, the purpose and background, it had listed a bunch of responsibilities, but then it had another section said responsibilities, and it had another section that listed all of the duties. And in addition to that, on the executive director evaluation form, which is part of the next agenda item, but you recall it from last year, it had some items that we were supposed to be evaluating our executive director on. Well, so we found that we had 3 different lists of what the responsibilities were, and it didn't make a lot of sense to us. So one of the simplifications was we cross-referenced everything in section 1 of the charter, executive director charter. We cross-referenced everything there to make sure that it was somewhere in the duties that are in section 3. So to make it easier for us to understand when we're putting together a evaluation form, we are suggesting from our ad hoc committee that we get rid of the list in section 1 and just refer to, it says including but not limited to the responsibilities and duties outlined in sections 2 and 3. So that is the first agenda item. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Sounds good.
Okay, then I would take a motion to approve those changes.
Will we approve the presented changes?
Thank you.
I approve, we approve the charter as amended.
That's what it should be. Sorry, I'll withdraw my motion. Go ahead, Richard.
Richard moved. Did Julie still want a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So we do need a roll call vote. Any further discussion? You guys are okay with that?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I want to say as part of the initial meeting with this committee, it was a pretty lively discussion. We all had gone through the material. But once we had finished that meeting, I will say our chair carried the water for all of us on this and did an immense amount of work that I think just has to be recognized.
Well,
my role in this was minor.
I'm trying to be retired, but yeah, thank you, Richard.
Kathy.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. There's still more work to do. Richard can do the next step.
There we go.
So we do need to have a roll call vote on item number 10 regarding the executive director charter motion that was made by Richard.
I will begin. Ms. Forrester?
Yes.
Ms. Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Mr. Jardine?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Shoemaker?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you all. So moving on to the performance evaluation form, it starts with that third list of the items that we're supposed to be evaluating the executive director on. So this is most likely going to change, but we want to wait until we have a final adopted strategic plan. So leaving that the way it is, I will tell you there's been 3 major changes in this document. The first major change is on the second page, where we added item number 5, which would include distributing the evaluation form to the staff members at MSERA. We would like to know whether that is appropriate for the board. We had pros and cons about it. I like to have information from the staff, and as an executive director myself, or president, I would like to have information from my staff. But when we have an organization that is this small, sometimes it's intimidating for the staff to put forward a an evaluation, even though they don't have to sign their name or whatever, because you might know who said what. So I don't know, Jim or Richard, if you have anything else to say there. I was just looking for the board's direction on whether or not we would leave this in here.
I really like.
I would suggest that Doris comment. I think actually she supported this concept.
I have no objection to a 360 evaluation.
Well, this isn't a full 360, but yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think she had mentioned that last year. Other members have comments, and I guess I should also put in there that it doesn't say that we're going to require it. It says that I would distribute as chair the forms, and I think that would be up to the staff member whether or not to incorporate or whether or not to send forth any comments. And I will say, as the process that I followed last year when Dan and I were doing the evaluation, was that I tried to take all of the comments and mesh them together into topical areas that did not hopefully indicate who said what. It was just in a format that brought everything together by topic.
I think it's it's kept confidential, and that was, I believe, stated in there as well, that it was, all the responses were confidential, and that if necessary, if there was work to be done to revise maybe staff statements once it's merged all together, so it sort of gets the meaning and behind whatever the response is without a quote that might further identify if there's anything.
Right.
So I like the idea of it being distributed to staff if they want to do it, and that Doris is welcoming that. Absolutely. My only question though too is on this funded status by 2040. That seems a little strange to me to hold on to Doris solely.
That was one of her comments.
performance.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know that that's realistic or reasonable. Although she as the executive officer would lead us towards that. That's not within her control how the market goes or decisions by the board.
That was part of our discussion last year, and Doris brought out several things on here that are with outside of her control.
Yeah.
And so that's why we think this needs to be changed. Okay. But I don't know if we want to pick at it now or wait until we get a new strategic plan. Let me move on, because that will come up again. So we're not done with that. So the first change had to be including staff with Doris's agreement to that, and with staff having the very confidential and the option to do it. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. The second major change had to do, it was also on page 2, new item number 7, also had to do with the timing. What we ran into last year, which I hadn't really noticed until last year when Doris was here, but what we ran into was us having the conversation in closed session and then inviting her in that same day immediately. And she had no time to really review what the evaluation said.
Mhm.
So by not changing the beginning of the start date of this, that the forms would go out in May, but then come back in June for a closed session with the board to get input onto the final form, then presenting Doris with the final form that the board has agreed upon, and then in July, closed session, which makes sense because it's the first month after the end of the fiscal year. Come back in July and talk with our executive director in closed session after she has had the time to review it. So that's what item 7 is saying.
Makes sense.
Does that mean agreement of the board? Okay. Appreciate that. And then the third change had to do with the form. And Julie, this gets down to what you were talking about. There were several comments last year about the form itself, and Doris actually took the form and put each one of the items that are on page 1 on a separate line and rated herself on each one of those items. And some other people had commented on their evaluation comments that it was difficult because all of the, some of the items underneath each general category could be handled a little bit differently, or they would have a different rating on it. So we just separated everything out that's already on there. And Julie has, of course, commented on some of the weird stuff, like the 100% funded by 2040 and the 95% client approval and all of these things. But those are the exact same words that are on page 1. It's just formatted differently. And instead of just general comments, we added some words to try to encourage people and offer some suggestions of what evaluators could respond. It's not as helpful for the executive director to get a comment that says, "You're doing a great job." That's wonderful, but it doesn't help know what to do differently or whatever, or what things are going well. So some comments were added on that. So at this point, those are the changes that our ad hoc committee is proposing. And Jim or Richard, did you have anything else to say from the meetings? Okay. So.
Excuse me for taking a minute or not mute.
That's okay.
That one of the things that came up in the first meeting we had with this is not only a look back, but it is a prospective process as well. And it is in setting up expectations for the next evaluation period. So that was something we haven't changed, but that I thought was the point that needed to be put out there.
I appreciate that, Richard. I think that as we move toward developing some sort of process that is more based on the strategic plan, that will become even more apparent too, that it's prospective. So I would ask for, if there's no further concerns or questions, I would ask for a motion to approve this going forward for this year, with the understanding that after the strategic plan is finalized, we will come back and look at it again, and any of you will be invited to participate in that review next time around.
So move, Madam Chair.
So Trustee Harris has moved to approve the Executive Director Performance Evaluation Policy and Evaluation Form. I need a second on it.
Okay.
Catherine seconded, thank you. Any further comment?
Really nice work, and for the whole committee, thank you.
Thank you.
This clarifies my thinking.
It's a good committee. Those two gentlemen have a lot of ideas.
Okay, we'll take the roll call vote. Ms. Forrester?
Yes.
Ms. Cavanis?
Yes.
Mr. Jurdy?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Shoemaker?
Do a thumbs up, Richard. We can't hear you. You're frozen. Okay.
There we
Thank you.
go.
Ms. Harris
Aye.
and Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thanks to the committee for working with me. So we are moving on to agenda item 12, discussion regarding special board of retirement election.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Members of the board, this item came back from last month's meeting and outlines a potential time frame to complete a special election to fill, I think it's the second chair that has been vacated by Trustee Forrester, since she is now our ex officio trustee. This would start immediately and wrap up the process that we would have a board member in place at the July meeting if this timeline is met. If you have any questions or comments, I'm happy, or Judy is happy to address questions regarding the election timeline or process.
Yes, Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, I was a little confused just from the standpoint that Trustee Forrester is currently in an interim position, and if we had a permanent position go into the ex officio slot, I'm a little confused as to why she wouldn't slide back into the general member slot after that election process.
Sure. Well, I've given my notice to the county, so I won't be continuing on. I'll be revising my either retirement or resignation date, which is set for June 4th at this time, but it looks like I'll be extending that a little further out in order to get the treasurer tax collector department into a more stable environment and get some projects completed before I do leave. So I won't be continuing on. So I think this is able to fill that position and get somebody to continue on. So I won't be going back into that position. It might be in the summer, but I don't have a new date yet, and I haven't notified anyone of that yet.
Really, you're far too young to retire.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking for other opportunities. So if anybody needs anybody, let me know.
I wasn't aware of that, Miss Trustee Forrester, and you'll be greatly missed on the board and for the county. You do an excellent job.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to hear that. I was looking forward to you taking on that position. But
well, I would be staying in my existing position if I stayed with the county. So due to the consolidation of the treasurer, tax collector, and auditor controller, it's really changed the nature of that department in my position. And so I feel like the employment is an agreement between the employee and the employer, and that's changed. And so I don't find it to be a fit for me any longer. And I had hoped that it would be, and I waited for a number of months with an open mind. And all I can say is I again don't feel that it'll be a fit. So I think it's time for me to move on and find some new opportunities, and that's why I had to come to that decision.
So we obviously will have some change in our composition of our board. Certainly come January, the new consolidated treasurer controller person will fill the ex officio seat on the board, and we'll have the election for the chair that Ms. Forrester is vacating, and Quincy is also up for election, so we will be doing an election closer to the end of the year for his position. We do still have a vacancy, so I want to encourage all of our trustees to think of people who they might cajole into being appointed onto the board. And also to start building that pipeline as part of our board succession plan. But we'll talk about that on another day. But there is a lot of change coming.
Usually, yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I guess this is to Jeff. Is there any sort of conflict for us in having the auditor sit on our board?
Yes.
Well, I can say that the serial permits the treasurer to serve, and if the county has a combined auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector, that person can serve as the treasurer position. There is perhaps the ability for the treasurer to appoint a designee. I've heard some debate on whether or not that actually is permissible, but in Fresno, their combined auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector does sit on the retirement board. I'm not saying whether that's a conflict or not. I'm just saying it is done.
I'll just say that's also true in Sonoma, and Julie Wine, who used to be the attorney for OSERS, is the executive director there. And she knows the Searle probably better than anybody else in the state, except for maybe one other person, and that's Neil Baker, who was their attorney and now sits on their board. And I don't recall if there were discussions on it or not, but it's an interesting question you're asking. I haven't heard it discussed, but I know there are other systems where that consolidation has occurred, and it's happened.
Well, we're all sorry to see you go, but you'll be with us at least next month.
Yeah, well, for a few more months.
For a few more months.
And I mean, the consolidation of the two offices isn't effective until January of 2023. So I don't know if that goes anything to Richard's questions there. The election is in June, so there's no official consolidation at this point. So I mean, if you're suggesting she might want to fill in as the employee representative to get a jump on it, maybe that can be an outreach to her to serve in the second seat, because it's the second seat, pending her coming into office in January 2023.
Which would just require we have to do another election, as the second seat would also have expired at the end of this year. Now, by virtue of this timeline and the timing of the election and seating, the serial allows us to fill that position, not just for the remainder of the term, because the end of the term is ending so soon, but to run the election for the residual of this term plus the next term. And that would be our intent. Hopefully to get somebody who would serve out the remainder of Julie's term and then immediately serve the 2 years following that. So this is what that special election would be for. If the board wants us to run the special election to only fill for the remainder of the current term, we can do that. But we would want to get the direction of the board on that.
I think it makes sense to run it for the remainder and the next 2 years. And if for some reason, whoever might become, well, they have to go through an election, but whoever might be elected into the tax collector, treasurer.
And there's only one person that files.
Oh, there's only one. Well, if she chose to run and be appointed for this particular announcement, which would cover 2+ years, and then she became the treasurer, tax collector, assessor, I can't get
Auditor, controller.
controller, okay, in January, then we'd have to run another election anyway.
Or
So-
we would run it potentially knowing, because we would know at some point that she is going to take the position
Right.
in January. I don't know if that we would know in October or November or something, but we might be able to run the election concurrent with the one that we would be running for Quincy's seat.
Right.
Do you know when we normally bring that up?
That would start in August, so with
So maybe
Be
not. I don't know
running
the time.
through August, September, and hopefully have someone elected as of October.
And do they start in December?
Their term begins
December one.
in December, so
Okay.
the goal is to have somebody in place for November so that they can have an orientation, come to a meeting prior to fulfilling their duties.
Quincy's not thinking of leaving, is he?
My understanding is that I expect him to run, I haven't heard differently. But now,
That course would mean that the seat would remain vacant until then.
Which course?
If we did not hold a special election and we just conducted both the general member and safety member seat elections later on this fall.
well, and the serial requires that you hold an election at the earliest possible opportunity, basically, which is why we brought forth the special election timeline for you.
Well, my vote is to move forward now, so we get somebody in that spot, and to go ahead and move forward with the 2+ years.
Okay, so if you're gonna ask for a motion,
Do I need a motion?
Jeff, do we need a motion?
This was discussed.
Well, your
Oh.
agenda item says discussion and direction, so I think direction is probably sufficient since, I mean, I think you could do it by direction. It probably should have been
Direction will be fine.
Does anybody have any concerns with moving forward as the agenda item is presented? Then your direction is to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are on discussion regarding administrative report, agenda item number 13. I don't know if there's any public comment. I don't know if there's any public.
There is no public in attendance at this time.
Okay, so Doris.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd like to highlight a couple of changes with our office. For those of you who came in person, you had the opportunity to meet Kayla and Lynette. They are our 2 new retirement specialists. They fill the position that Judy vacated when she was promoted, and also the position that was authorized by this board in the last budget cycle that we had waited to fill while we were working on some of the project work. So I want to welcome our new 2 retirement specialists.
And we should add that our extra help employee is now out on maternity leave, and probably that position will now end. So, but she's doing well.
Good.
And happy.
Good.
Yes, the extra help position had only been budgeted through June 30, and we don't have it in next year's budget at this point. So that position will be coming off the roll.
But we have a new full-time.
Right, we have the full-time folks who will pick up a lot of those duties, or all of those duties.
Good.
So as I previously mentioned, we have resumed monthly processing of the newsletter. We did send out the April edition. We will send again in May. If you are not already receiving it, I would encourage you to go ahead and subscribe. I did include a link in the agenda materials.
But the link didn't pick me.
Did it
where I
not
wanted
work?
it to.
I do apologize.
I mean, I think I did it, but.
Oh, if you, it took me to the newsletter page. You have to scroll all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah, it's at the bottom. We can move it to the top.
Move it to the top, you know I won't find it.
I mean, you really have to scroll down because there's a lot of newsletters there, but anyway, there is a way to register if you want to subscribe.
I thought that picture
And you can
of
read-
you was wonderful.
Oh, thank
That
you.
is
If
very
you can
nice.
read the historical newsletters there too.
In fact, I think you have on the same blue shirt.
Additionally, I did mention that we will have some expenses relating to the strategic plan, and in the budget that will be coming for your review, it includes allocations for an information technology consultant, a survey consultant, cyber audit, and those are all tied to our strategic plan. Additionally, it is coming up time for us to perform our actuarial audit that I think is, we say we do every 5 to 7 years or something. I think we're there and due. So this includes the upcoming budget will include an allocation for that. So I just wanted to bring those to your attention. If you have any questions, please let me know. Our actuary and our auditors, the contracts for those service providers do expire after the June 30, 2022 valuation and financial audit. So at this point, we will want board direction whether or not the board wishes to RFP for services or extend the existing contract. The last time we had an RFP for actuarial services was in 2011, and it was 2017 for our financial audit services.
Comment there, trustee Harris?
Am I incorrect in thinking that there are really only two big actuarial firms that meet our specifications?
I know that we had probably 3, if not 4 responses to an RFP for actuarial services when I was in Fresno. The big players in the state, especially among sterile systems, do happen to be Siegel, Chiron, Milliman, and the other company that Fresno is actually using. They use Siegel for that. I don't remember who else may have responded for services for actuary. But again, it's at the board's preference or direction. We can, I believe in the past, because the project was underway and there was a lot of work going on there, the board had indicated that they didn't really want to RFP and potentially change service providers at that point in time. The extension on the contracts are coming up through after the close of this fiscal year, and we will need to get someone in place for the valuation for June 30 of 23 and the audit at that point. So we want to have enough lead time that if we do have to RFP, we can get the RFP in a vendor selected RFP process. Absolute minimum of 5 months probably, but you're realistically looking for it like 6 or even 7. So we want to get this queued up before too much longer.
Your memo said by the end of November, you would need direction.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
So I don't need direction today. I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar. Robert, did you have any comments regarding that at this point? No. Okay, and the last item in the administrative report was just a reminder that the SACR Spring Conference is occurring May 10th through the 13th. We currently do not have any trustees scheduled to attend. And there's an attached legislative report from SACRS. If you have any questions regarding the SACRS materials, please let me know. There was a slate of candidates in the business meeting packet, but again, that's not particularly all that relevant unless someone decides at this point that they would like to attend. Registration is open through April 30. I do not know, though, what the availability is at the conference hotel at this late date.
So I would, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Catherine, for your service to SACRS in the previous years. I didn't know that you were dropping out of the nominee list for this year, but we sure thank you for what you have done. I noticed on the candidates in the business meeting information that they're all, you know, big old places down south. Of course, there aren't too many rural counties up north, but anyway, I always like to have a small representation. So I guess we're losing that. Richard?
Madam Chair, thank you for saying that. You basically took the words out of my mouth in thanking Catherine for her work at SACRS. I'm sure with the planning for conferences and so forth during the pandemic period, it was an exceptionally tough job, but thanks so much for representing us there.
Well, thank you very much. Also, Sulema Peterson has made it relatively easy during the during the pandemic, having virtual conferences, and I have a lot of respect for her for what she's done. And I my main objectives for being on the SACRS board was to represent the smaller and northern systems, but now the only one that we have is David McDonald from Contra Costa County, representing, a northern system, and which is very, very different from our system. And we'll just, we'll have to see how it goes. But I really do need a break from from being on SACRS.
Understand. Trustee Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment that in reviewing this, and I know SACRS is going through the difficult transition between virtual conferences and in-person conferences. I noted on this one, as I reviewed it, is that there was very little information about the agenda, what was going, who the speakers were, and so forth. And I think it's unfortunate that we don't have any attendees, but it was also, if they're looking for some feedback, perhaps from Doris, is that there was very little information about, who was going to be at the conference, who was going to be speaking.
Well,
the speaker lineup and agenda often does come out kind of late, but Catherine did.
It does, and I think they have a good, selection. And yeah, usually, we start working on it like at least a year ahead, and then there are always changes toward the end. So I think there still might be a lot of changes. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but that's interesting, Jim, that you're saying that you didn't see very much information as far as.
They do have an updated preliminary agenda. It does have some more information, although I believe it's still listed as preliminary. But it does provide some session titles and speakers names.
One of the things that I had mentioned in our meetings was that some of the systems and also the CFOs are interested in more information on investments and those kind of topics. But SACRS always tries to have sort of a balanced set of speakers where you have motivational speakers, political updates. So if anybody has a preference as to what they would like to see at SACRS, I would strongly recommend to contact Zulema and let her know, because it is up to us to a degree.
Thank you. Seems like there was something else. No. Yes, I'm sorry.
It's okay, no problem.
I knew there was something else.
Just a point of personal privilege. And I don't know I know I was there. I don't know if anyone else was there from Mendocino County when Catherine ran for election. And she unseated an incumbent by saying that not only was she from Northern California, but from a small county, and she just did a lot of work to make herself the #1 person, and has done an amazing job in that position. And I'm just really proud of you, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Jerry, and thank you for all your support. You're very motivational.
The educator.
Yes. And it is interesting, because I had the same thing in the community college system with California community colleges, because they think any meeting up north, it might be in San Francisco, and that's north.
Right.
So, yes. And then I was at College of the Redwoods, and nobody knows how far north that is.
Except us.
Yes, except us. Anyway, thank you for that report.
Yeah.
So we are now open for agenda item 14 for any board member discussion. And I did, when I saw the item about Director Rentschler's education on the consent calendar, it made me think about board members presenting or at least acknowledging when they've gone to anything. So this would be a great place for us to do that in future meetings. If you go to a meeting or if you do some professional education online or whatever, this would be a good place to let the other board members know what you did and whether it was worth it for us to go do it or not. So any comments on anything general? Then I would say that we are at a point of adjournment, and our next meeting will be on May 18th at 8:30 a.m. and it too will be hybrid.
I would expect that it would be hybrid unless there's a desire for the board to require trustees attendance in person and have hybrid only for the public. And once we move off that topic, there's something I forgot to mention I'd like to go back.
Okay. So what I understood from our initial discussion on the resolution was we were going to continue as is until we get more notification about health orders.
But how nice it is not to have to wear masks.
Oh, how nice it is, yes. But I had to put on real shoes. I totally get it.
Your fluffy bunny slippers.
I guess I could have.
That made me look.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that the AMPRE, Association of Mendocino County Retired Employees, reached out to me, and I am actually scheduled to speak at their lunch meeting on May 9th, their business meeting. So that's open to all membership, and I will be giving probably a brief update on the project. I was hoping we'd have more information to provide, which I probably don't, but I'll be there for question and answers after a brief presentation. I just want to let the board know that I was scheduled at that meeting.
Where and what time?
It's at Slam Dunk Pizza on May 9th, which is Monday, and it starts at noon, is my understanding.
Okay. Good luck. I'm glad you're going. That's great. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. At whatever time it is, 11:17.
Good meeting, Madam Chair.
Yeah,
Boy,
we
that
got
was a
you
tough
out.
one to get through, and
Got you
I
out in
not
time
even
for your-
do